What's going on, you loyal listeners? Thank you for tuning in to the Elsewhere podcast. I'm your host here, Luke Larson, and joining me today, as per the unusual, lovely and loquacious special guest who will be assisting me in leisurely launching you into levity, director of the new film Small Town, Wisconsin, which is showing at the South Dakota Film Festival right now, director Niels Mueller. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I saw your film at the South Dakota Film Festival, and it's just an incredible piece of art. It really touched me, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it, honestly. But could you kind of give the listeners kind of a synopsis of what the film's about?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I'm really proud of this one. So Small Town, Wisconsin centers around a character, a guy named Wayne Stobierski, who's a loving father, but in far northern Wisconsin, way up toward Lake Superior and very rural part of the state. He's a loving father, but he's also irresponsible. He's got a problem. He's a drinker, and he finds out he's losing shared custody of his son about 20 minutes into our story, and that means his son is going to move with his mother and stepfather to Arizona. As Wayne says to his best buddy, I don't get to be his dad no more, and that's for all intents and purposes correct, because this is a guy who's getting by on part-time work. Anyway, Wayne asks his wife for permission to take his son on one last father-son trip to remember him by to the big city, which is Milwaukee, and it's all the way downstate. It's actually where I grew up. So the second half of the film is kind of a love letter to Milwaukee, but it has a tremendous amount of humor to the film, and it becomes a coming together of a family story. But the thing that I love about it is there are a lot of secrets that aren't being shared. Wayne has his secrets, and everybody is kind of, like in a lot of families, there are things that people just haven't communicated, and issues are kind of forced to the surface in a comic and dramatic way. I think it's a film that, a lot of people will relate to. I don't want to give away too much about it, but there's sort of your overview.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it means a lot. This film means a lot to me. It really touched me deeply. I think that a lot of times that just as an audience member, I'll say, like, going into a film, if you know a lot about a particular topics and the film is touching on that, it can kind of take you out of it if the details aren't quite right, or it kind of, those sort of things stand out to you. So when I heard the title Small Town Wisconsin, it was like, all right, like, we'll see if you can capture me being from small town Midwest my whole life too, is like, all right, we'll see. And just right off the bat was like,
right.
Wow. I mean, I could not believe how well that was captured, and it's just something that it's like, wow, that's from my soul, and it's just out there, and it was, you really did a great job of capturing, like, sort of this, maybe this is me projecting, but it seems like some of these small towns just sort of have this like inherent sadness. They just feel a little bit forlorn, almost like they were sort of left in the past. Maybe they did better in the, I don't know when, the 60s or 50s, but sort of can't really move on with the times because of their, limited industry or whatever. And so you kind of run into a lot of people that, or at least in my experience, grow up there and then kind of leave to pursue other things. But then the people that are kind of stuck there don't always wish to be stuck there, and then kind of have this sort of inherent sadness. And maybe that's just me projecting on it, but I thought you did a really great job of capturing that.
Well, again, thanks. And you're hitting on a lot of things that I certainly tried to explore in the film. And the key thing for me is, so I'll take the compliment from you growing up in a small town that I hit it. Often, you know, our whole film was made by Wisconsinites. Josh Rosenberg, Scott Foley, my producing partners, both from Wisconsin. The whole cast, almost everybody's from Wisconsin except David Sullivan, and the lead is from a small town in East Texas. So he really had small town in his blood and bones. But often you watch these films set in our part of the country where you and I grew up, and it has like kind of an outsider's perspective. And, you know, you'll often, you know, start the film with establishing shots showing the quaint town and isn't this an odd, funny little place? I didn't do that because I don't look at it that way. I mean, these small towns have CNN and everything else. They're connected to this country. And there still are plenty of good things certainly happening in small towns. There are people making a choice who really like living in a rural part of the country. And but like that sadness you talk about, it's like, you know, so much has changed. Industry has moved away, and you have people grasping for, in a way, for you know, something that's no longer there, an industry that's gone, etc. And so I wanted to take a look at you know, at the also part of the film, this sort of rural addiction crisis, etc. But all in the context of telling a personal story with, like I said to you right before we started talking officially. What I love about the film is everyone has their secrets. You know, it's like in any family, there are things that are not said, things that are kept inside, and we know as an audience what's happening, and you're waiting for something to come out, and just watching people deal with personal problems, but also in the context of this film, a film that's really about, you know, a family coming together and trying to heal, all in the context of both drama and a lot of comedy. It's just always been my interest is to explore character, and I certainly knew these people I was doing the film about well. I worked in my father's warehouse and worked with guys who came in from smaller towns and drove into Milwaukee to work in the warehouse, and I just knew I knew these folks, and I liked these folks. I worked with them, cheered for the football team, and so it was important to me to do it authentically.
Yeah, well, I think you very much succeeded, and I'm so glad this film exists. And like I said, it really got in there. But I was also thinking while I was making it, like, or while I was watching it rather, like, how did this movie get made? Like, who? I'm just curious. Like, it's great I'm glad it exists, and I know that, you know, it was a passion project of yours too. But just curious, who else would be interested in making this kind of a film?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of film, we used to make these films at the studios, you know, way back when in the 70s. These were the kinds of films that were being made, and, you know, and finding audiences. But to get a drama made that really, again, with all kinds of comedy to it, but that is trying to explore all the layers of society and a family. We just are just not making that many of these anymore. And on top of that, I had two sort of hard and fast things I really wanted in place to make this film. One, I wanted to find a financier who would let me cast just the right actors. They could be big name actors, but I really wanted to be able to just also look at actors who work a lot because they're pros, but who don't necessarily get the leads yet. I think all of the actors in this film was such a tremendous cast to work with. But I wanted to be able to go for the right actors, to find actors who had, you know, like you talked about, small town in their blood. And I cast, you know, of my sort of four primary lead adult actors, Kristen Johnston from Milwaukee, Tanya Fisher from West Bend, Wisconsin, Bill Heck grew up just south of the border in Illinois, but he spent every summer in Minocqua, which is a small town. And then David Sullivan from East Texas, so we had to teach him how to say the word oil instead of all. But everybody just got what this film was about. They were either from Wisconsin or got small town America. And then one of the other thing was, I really, like I was saying earlier, I really wanted to shoot in Wisconsin, to have Wisconsin be a character. And so, but it was very hard. I couldn't find the financing in Hollywood, but luckily I met my financier, Lu Hongtao, who's a really very established and successful Chinese producer and financier. And he said, make it that way, Niels. That's the right way to do it. So I got very lucky finding backing.
Wow, that's incredible. And you brought up David Sullivan, and I was so excited to see him in a leading role because, like, I was a big fan of Flaked. That was a series on Netflix that he did, that he was kind of second fiddle, best friend, and he does such a great job of playing. That's kind of how in my head, that's sort of who David Sullivan is for me. So to see him as the lead was exciting for one thing. He killed it, but it also, like, in a way, it sort of played on two different parts for me, because it's sort of like you have this guy who is actors typically, character actor, and getting the spotlight, and also the film is about a small town in Wisconsin that no one would ever really think about also getting the spotlight. But could you kind of talk about what it was like working with David Sullivan in this cast?
Yeah, I like how you put that too. And I think that's why I wanted fresh faces. I really wanted people to feel like they were stepping into small town America without necessarily having to get past a familiar face. So I was really glad I got to cast this the way I did. Yeah, Sully, it's interesting actually. He read for Chuck, and the way casting is being done now, even before the pandemic, a lot of times actors are putting themselves on tape at the invitation of casting directors who want them to submit, and they'll send in a read of a part. And Sully, David Sullivan, read for Chuck initially, and I was sitting with actually a guy I went to kindergarten through high school with, who was a huge help for me in making this film, Guy Fiorita. And we watched it together, and he turned to me before I said anything, said, Niels, that's not Chuck, that's Wayne. And I said, so right, you are so right. And then Sully came in, and I had him read with another actor, and he blew me out of the water. I knew I wanted him. I called him right afterwards, and I said, I got to meet with you again tomorrow. I want to read the whole script with you. And I said, oh man, he said, I'd love to. But he was on his way to the airport here in LA to fly to East Texas to go to a washer throwing contest. You do that in South Dakota?
No.
You take like really big washers. He showed me a video, and you toss them into a bucket, and then it's like there's a beer competition involved. He just knows small town America well.
Yeah.
So I got together with Sully after he got back, and it was. And then when I put him together, I did chemistry reads with him and Cooper Friedman, who plays his son. Amazing. Then put him together with Bill Heck, who plays Chuck. Just fantastic. And I don't know if I answered your question on how it is to work with them. I just kind of, but work. You want me to go into more detail on that or no?
I think we get it. I mean, it sounds like they were great, and
I love. This was really one of the great professional experiences of my life. I so loved the film, and I so loved making this film with this group of people. It was just.
It's so cool that you got to have your homecoming and come back and really, like you said, make a love letter to where you're from. And it kind of got me thinking, when you were growing up in Milwaukee, did you ever think as a kid, did you have aspirations to get into filmmaking?
Great question. I mean, I did make, without just editing in camera, I took I borrowed my father's Super 8 camera, and I have
Mm.
one, like 3 minute, however long those Super 8 reels were, short, starting all the neighbor kids, where you can see them waiting to start running, and they start running. It was some caper that I probably made when I was like 11 or 12. But then my father has always been a big cinema fan, and he would take my older
Mm.
brother and me to see films that were hard to see usually. Like they
Mm.
were started seeing. Well, my father's from Germany, and we go see German films at University of Wisconsin Milwaukee. Would put up these films, and I was
Mm.
watching films by Werner Herzog, who remains one of my favorite filmmakers.
Yeah.
And I didn't really entirely understand them, but this was a kind of film, because I was a teenager. But I just
Mm.
leaned into these things. Like, what is good? It was just about character and humanity, and they interested me.
Yeah.
And so I really got interested in film. I didn't really think that you could make a living at it. It was just a passion. And then in college I started doing short films. Brought in my next door neighbor in college was Gary Winnick, who ended up having a really good
Mm.
career. He passed away, unfortunately. Well, gosh, it's almost 10 years ago. But I wrote Tadpole for him. I wrote the
Mm.
production draft for 30 Going on 30 for him, and worked on Letters to Juliet with him. So we started doing films at Tufts, and even then I didn't necessarily think of it as a career, just something I loved. And then it was actually Gary who said, "Hey, Niels, instead of law school, we should let's apply to film school." And I'm glad we did, because it's nice to be passionate about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad he talked you into it. It seemed to work out.
Thank you.
Um, I'm just, I keep thinking about, and we don't have to get into detail if you don't want to, but the the scene where when they go to Milwaukee, just
Mm.
there's that specific part um, where they're kind of building up to what they were going there to do, and that just sticks in my head as I wrote this down, but I said that's got to be like my favorite scene of any film this year. I mean, it just like it really just took my breath away, and I felt exactly what the characters were feeling, this awe and excitement, and just like the nervous energy, and you're like, here we go, and then just it it plays out, so
You're talking
beautifully
about
too.
going to the ballpark.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Somebody said to me, and I appreciate it. It's a great reference, but that there's a bicycle thief, the great neo-realist film
Mm.
by Vittorio De Sica. There's an element of that to this story. And I like that, and I think that it's an apt comparison. I'll take it. There, 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 and it's the thing with this film, which I love about it. I've always liked films where you're kind of riding that razor's edge, where it can be complete tragedy or complete comedy. And this is a film that I think around every turn is the possibility of either. Because I just think that's life. We
Yeah.
just life is hard. It's gotten harder under pandemic, but we have to keep smiling and finding the grace and the joy, and however we can, as
Yeah.
we move through, as these characters are doing. But yeah, but I thank you. That was a difficult sequence to pull off, and so I'm really
Mm.
glad that it worked so well, that it resonated for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of made me think of, we somehow on this show we end up like thinking that every film reminds us of Manchester by the Sea. We kind of keep going back to that, and that kind of it brought it to mind because like the standout for me from Manchester by the Sea is like I think it's about like incremental change and how it's unrealistic to think that people make these huge sweeping changes in, you know, a 90-minute in story, but just sort of those little steps we take to, you know, to recognize patterns and kind of, you know, try and move away from them. And I just love those films, and this also captures it so well too, of just like, it's fun to go to films and go to movies and have that entertainment and have it be, you know, this big sweeping thing, and how it's so exciting and fun. But it's also, for me, I really appreciate and love when it's more of a reflection of real life, you know.
Well, that's really well put. I love how you just put Manchester about Manchester by the Sea, about being about incremental change. It's a film I thought that was just beautifully done film. And yeah, I think I'm right with you, Luke. It's I mean, the thing that always has attracted me about film is it gives us a chance to look at the world through another set of eyes and try to shift our perspective for that hour or two, and see how somebody else might be looking at the world, and try to understand either what's going right or what's going wrong from that perspective. And the notion of incremental change certainly applies here, without giving anything away toward at the very end of the film. But there is that incremental step that Wayne takes. It's a film that offers hope, but yeah, we just have to hope he seizes on hope.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so excited for people to be able to see this film. Now, it's still showing at the South Dakota Film Festival through September 26th. So everybody listening to this, please go out and watch it. That's southdakotafilmfest.org/VOD. You can find it there. But if they don't get a chance to see it here, is there a way that we can follow the film and be able to find when it gets released?
Yeah, and I'm a total Luddite when it comes to social media. My cinematographer and great friend Nate Goodman has been running our Facebook page. I think it's Small Town Wisconsin Film. I turned off my phone. But we're on Facebook. We have, I can tell you, we have a number of festivals coming up. We've been invited. We're having great success, especially we've really been targeting the Heartland, Industrial North, because we want the film to emerge where it was shot. And so I can't announce all of the festivals because they would like to do that themselves, understandably. But Buffalo International is coming up. Boston is going on right now. Boston's a great festival. And it'll be up on their site for a while. Go to bostonfilmfestival.com, I think, or just Google it. But yeah, you can also just find us on Facebook. I'm sure if you put in Small Town Wisconsin Film, you'll find us, and we'll have all kinds of information.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll link it in the episode for them too. So, thank you so much, Niels, for coming on. It means a lot, and I really loved your film. I think it's an important film, and I'm excited for it to blow up. I really hope that it can touch a lot of people, like it touched it.
I very much appreciate it, and I have to tell you, it means a lot to hear it from you, having grown up in the part of the country that we shot in, and to hear that it resonated and felt as authentic as it did to you, that you went in with that understandably skeptical eye, because so often these films set in small town America just are almost like you're looking inside a terrarium, and they just, no, these are real people with real lives, and that's certainly what we went for. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And as always, loyal listeners, you can find me on Twitter at LukeLarson89. Find this podcast at L Squared Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram at L2 Podcast on Facebook. Hit us up. Let us know what you thought about Small Town Wisconsin, again, showing right now at the South Dakota Film Fest. Go to southdakotafilmfest.org/VOD, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. Thanks again, Niels.
Thanks, Luke.